If you've been following my videos, you know I've been working on clearing out lots of charm squares. I have more 5-inch squares stacked around than I know what to do with, and I've come up with another way that we can make some gorgeous quilts. You're going to love this. It's a super simple block, but there are some amazing layouts. I have 3 ideas I want to share with you. And it's not even the changing of the pattern itself, but what you can do with color. Oh my goodness, color can be such a dynamic difference in your quilt. I'm Lea Louise from Inspired Quilting by Lea Louise, and I'm going to show you how to make this simple block for a fabulous finish. There are 3 different ways that I could come up with just in this video of how you can finish this. And I know there's more, and I can't wait to find more, but we'll work on that together. Right now, let's go ahead and get started. I have some great ideas to share with you. You probably recognize my charm square bins. This is what we're going with today. Actually, there's a couple different ways we can make this block with charm squares, but we can also use some strips. So I'm going to show you how both work. And the quilt ideas I'm sharing with you today are a result of an email I received from Janet Knight. She's a subscriber and she loves to quilt, and she made a beautiful charm square quilt that she calls Twice as Charming. And I loved how it turned out, and I asked her if I could share it with everybody. Now, it's a rail fence, but it's a jazzed up rail fence, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of variations to this pattern out there, but we're going to have some fun changing the colors in this quilt. So check it out. Here's a photo of Janet's quilt that she made, and I love how it turned out, and this is what prompted me to make today's quilt blocks that we're going to be looking at. And you notice the charm squares, and they alternate direction. They turn 90 degrees across the row. Now, Janet also did a offset on her rows in order to get this extra, what do I want to say, sashing or lattice between the alternating rows, and I think it looks wonderful. It really is such a pretty quilt, and of course those K-facet prints are terrific, and they're just so bright and bold, and the way she did it with the colorizing, the rainbow layout, I think it's wonderful. So thank you, Janet, for sending this to me, and I hope everybody enjoys the quilt blocks we're going to be talking about today. Here is a very simple charm square block. This is what we're going to make the quilt out of. And it's a lot of fun because you get to use so many different fabrics. Now, you can use a strip here, and if you have layer cakes, you can cut it 10 inches, but I'm going to go ahead and use charm squares. I want a 9-inch square that will finish at 8.5, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, a couple things I want to talk about is we want darker colors in the center, lighter colors on the outside in order to get our contrast. These, for the most part, are going to have white or very light backgrounds. And most of what I'm using are batiks, and they have beige prints. So they're very neutral, which means these colors are all going to stand out really well against this particular color fabric or this type of fabric. It's going to work beautifully. The other thing we want to do is make sure we press these well, and we want to make sure that we nest our seams right here. So I'm going to show you on a couple here that I just did how we're going to press them and then put them together. But the last thing about this block that's interesting, if we put 2 5-inch squares together with a 1/4-inch seam, it's going to measure 9.5, but I want a 9-inch. And so I can do one of 2 things. I can either trim my charm squares to be 5 by 4.5, or I can just take a 1/2-inch seam. So you see I have 1/4-inch seams on the side going in opposite directions, so they're going to nest. But this center seam where I'm joining the 2 blocks are a 1/2-inch seam allowance. And this is going to make the quilt square turn out exactly as I want without extra trimming. Now, if you find some of your blocks aren't exactly looking square, This one's looking pretty good, but if you have problems, make sure either with your square ruler, let me show you. A square ruler works really well because you can put your 9-inch here and you can put your 9-inch here and then just trim off on these edges. Now, alternatively, you can use your grid and just trim off at 9 inches. 9 inches is the critical measurement to get the block we need. Now, let me show you how to make the blocks. These blocks go together really quick, and I love how easy it is. All we're going to do is, let me open this up, is chain piece everything as we go. And what I did is you can tell on this one, I'm pairing similar colors, not exact, and I want different patterns. I want it to stand out but yet be sort of the same color scheme, and that's what I've done here on these. Now, I start with my background, which in my case is low volume, and then I put pairs together that are going to work as a single unit, as a single block. And what I'm going to do now is I will come through and trim these, but first I need to sew across this center seam. Now, couple things before I do anything. I press this. And it doesn't matter which is which, but I press one. Whoops, I didn't press these. Oh, this is the piece that I just sewed and didn't do anything to. Okay, let's go take a look at the next one. I don't know if I pressed any of these. So we're going to talk about pressing since these aren't actually pressed. But essentially, you just want to press one row this way, one row the other. It doesn't matter. Nothing is going to be matching up, so that's not going to be a concern. Then once you have your strips all pressed nice and pretty, what we're going to do is come back on this end, because remember, when we started, both ends had 5-inch squares, and the other end didn't have anything on it. But we need each charm to have like a sashing is essentially what we're doing. Now, as you can see here, I have these done again in the same similar colorways. This is a little burgundy-ish, red, pink, and sort of some fuchsia. You'll notice one side starts with a low volume on both, and then this one ends with the focal fabric. Now what I'm going to do is come in and cut this off so I can add my half strip to each side, and I'm going to cut it at 2.5 inches because it was a 5-inch square. And now we have our lattice here. You can see I've already sewn one, and now I'll sew the other, and that's how we get to this point. Now from there, this is what our block will look like, or I should say our strip set. And here we are. So then we end up with this. Now on these smaller pieces, you'll notice I have just 4 colors or 4 sets of each color. And that was just because I wanted to make sure I have random colors throughout. But this is going to go together like this. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is come in, I'll get my 1/2-inch seam taken care of. I'll open this and then I'll cut these into my 9-inch blocks. So that's how I get my square. It's very, very quick and easy. And then here's one where I did, here's the one I pressed. Yay, let's take a look at this. And with the opposite seams going each way, just like this. Here they go this way and this way. These have already been adjusted here. But what I want to show you is I just sewed a bunch of these, and you can see I've got quite a few going. And I just, went through all my fabrics and I pulled them out, and with each one I looked for a mate that I could put together. And now all I need to do is go through and sew my 1/2-inch seam down the center, get everything pressed, cut my strips, my blocks at 9 inches, and I'm going to have plenty to make a quilt. This goes so quickly. Oh my goodness, I love it. Before we get to the big reveal of that block, I do want to show you the other color variation. I love the difference between the two, and it's such an easy way to change your quilt up. You're really going to enjoy watching this one. I had my 40 charm squares, and I've sewn them together in pairs with a 1/2 inch seam, and I press the seam open. I don't normally do that, but just because of the way this block goes together, I think this is going to look nicer and make quilting a lot easier. Each of these are divided into groups of 4 because they're 9 inches long. 9 times 4 is 36, and that's the most I'll be able to get out of my jelly roll strips because these are 2.5 inches wide by the width of fabric, which is going to be about 40-ish to 42 inches. And let's see here. Oh my goodness. I sometimes get quite the octopus going here with the pieces going every which way. Okay, now what I'm going to do is use the darkest colors because I want a good, what do I want to say? I want a really good contrast that's going to stand out. So I'm going to start by pulling the dark ones and leaving the lights. And let's see, so I'm going to need a total of 10 strips because I have 5 sets of 4 and I need a strip for each set. So that's 10. And as I go through here, let's see, I'll have some blues. There's 2 blues of the same. And oh, this goes with that one. And there's 2 of those. Now, I don't really want to go with a white background, but I do like the dark blue background, of which there are 3, which works good. So 4 and 3 is 7. I need 3 more. And this is pretty dark. And what else do we have? Do we have another good dark one? These are all, there we go. Oh, wow, I like this one. I like these round ones. What I might do, just so I can go ahead and go with a pair of each. Let's see, this one I had 1, 2. I took 3 of those, plus I had an extra, I think. All right, let's see. Oh my goodness, so I have 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Okay, so we are ready to put this group together. And the way this will happen is I'm going to take my 2.5 inch strip and I will put my block, my pair of charms, down first. Now, double check and make sure they measure 9 inches, which they all should, simply because with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, that's where you ought to end up. Now, I'm going to start my seam above the selvage. Now, if it's easier for you to get a straight line and not chance getting crooked here, then we can just cut our selvage off like this, and then we'll sew our strip on top. I do recommend putting your strip on top. Sometimes if you put it down on the bottom, you can get it a bit wavy, and I prefer doing it this way because then it's going to be moved along at a better rate that's going to match the back. So I'm going to do 4 with each strip on one side, then I'm going to do the other side. And I think since I have 2 colors, I'm trying to decide if I want to mix them up or you know, use the same. I don't know, but I'll figure that out while I'm sewing and see what I like best. All right, we're on to this next step. The strip sets are finished, they're pressed, and they're ready to be cut. What we need to do now is cross-cut these into our 9-inch squares. It's going to be different for each of the 2 blocks because of the way they're assembled. So I'm going to break that down and show you how each gets done. Everything's sewn together, it's pressed. I have my 1/2 inch seam allowance, it's pressed open. These are pressed so that they nest, and I've got great looking seams. Now I need to cut these, and I'm going to cut them down the center. You can line it up on your grid and use your ruler with the grid and find your center that way, but I'm going to use my square ruler. I think this works out really well. So I'm going to make sure that I have 9 inches here, but I also want to make sure that I have my 2 1/4 inch. There we go. Because I'm going to cut this in half, and then there'll be a seam allowance to finish at a 2-inch seam. So I need to make sure I have 2 1/4 on each side. And I'm just going to go through and cut all these. And it doesn't take long. It goes pretty quick. This is also a good way to make sure that your blocks are square by using this square ruler. And I just want to line that up. I know if you've watched, I use that second little ruler quite a bit when I'm cutting my squares because it works really well. It's a good double check and I have very good results with it. So I'm going to line my 2 1/2 right there, or excuse me, 2 1/4, and I have my 2 1/4 right there, and then I cut it. Before cutting the rest of these strips, I just wanted to show you kind of a fun idea. And this way, if you're using layer cakes, think how easy this quilt would be. You just take your layer cakes, divide it in half, light and dark, and then put your blocks together, sew them so that you can, down the center, so you can cut them in half, and then you'll have, a pair of each of these, and you put them together just like this, and it's just a basic, simple rail fence. This would be really, really easy. And I just thought this looked so pretty. I like the idea of the double charm, but nothing says you can't find a fun background layer cake to put in here, and then you avoid doing that seam. So there's always so many ways to do a block, but when I saw this, I just had to show you. Okay, now let me go ahead and get my cutting finished. Here's the second set of blocks, and this is the one we're doing with the strips. So the first thing I did is I took my double charms that I had pieced and used the 1/2 inch seam allowance, pressed it open, and then I just sewed them onto a strip. And I took the strip on top and I sewed it, and I went through all 4, which was this side, cut them in between, pressed them open, and then I came back and I added the second piece. Now, I'm not real sure if one way is faster than the other. This one seemed quicker only because there was less maybe cutting or ironing. I'm not sure which, but it worked out pretty good for me. But I have to do more trimming with this one. And let's see, how much does this measure? Okay, this is just over 9 inches, which means I probably didn't take that full 1/2 inch seam. But that's okay, because if they all measure the same, then that's going to work out fine. So I'm going to line this up because I want to get a nice straight edge here. And I'm just going to go through and cut that on each of these. And then I'm going to get the rest of them all finished and trimmed and figure out where I need to go. But see, if you look at this edge, I'm definitely going to have to trim. So it'll be a double cut. And so I put my 9 inch here and a 9 inch there. Make sure, whoa, what am I doing here? Something's not straight. All right, let me put it on my grid. Something was looking a little wonky there. Yeah, it's laying out nice. Here we go. So we're right 9 to 9. So we're right there. And then I can come right here. There we go. And there's my 9. All right. So I must have just had my block laying a little crooked. Okay, so that's what we need to do. And I have about 20 of each set. So these are all ready to go. I grouped them into 3 color groups. These are sort of the dark blue, purple, and green. And then these are the turquoise, and these are the pinks and reds on the bottom. Now, this one, I'm just going to kind of see how it all works, and then we'll get down to the end and figure out some method to sort it and divide them up, and then that's the way I'll do the assembly. But what I'm really excited about is showing you how these blocks lay out. Oh my goodness, it is such a really cool way to make an easy quilt. And you know, I don't know if you've noticed yet, but this is a rail fence. We have 3 rails. Now the middle one is wide. This is a double. Ordinarily we would have like 4, what do I want to say, 4 strips or 4 rails in here. And oh, I do want to show you a quick quilt that I'm working on. This is one I'm doing. I may have mentioned I've got a low volume class, an online class that I'm working on. But see, this is the same kind of thing with using the rail fence. And this is all done in low volume. But see how you just take these strips and just pile them up next to each other? It works out beautiful. And then, like this one, we just have the 3 strips, and you get an idea of what's going to happen here, because we're going to cut this and we're going to turn them, and it's going to create such a wonderful contrast, and there's going to be these fabulous borders, and it's in reverse because the borders here are light, where they're here, they're going to be much darker. And I just can't wait to show you the difference between the two. So 1 block, and there's a lot you can do with this because there's also multiple layouts instead of just this 90-degree turn. But we'll get there, 1 step at a time. I want to share something that's never happened before, and just so this doesn't happen to you. I mentioned earlier that I have these 2.5-inch jelly roll strips, and it's called Vitamin C from Northcott. And it specifically says on here that I have 2.5-inch strips. And I'd have thought that was 2.5-inch strips. Now, you know, a lot of fabric is now being cut with the little pinked edge, that zigzag, but it still measures. You know, the charm squares still measure 5 inches, layer cakes still measure 10. And maybe it's just this particular company because I haven't bought any other jelly rolls lately. But when I put this right on here, now this is a 2.5-inch ruler. And when I put this on my strip and I put it right up to the edge of that pinked zigzag over there, look at this. There's 1/8 of an inch missing. So what happened is, because these were cut narrower than they should have been and narrower than what it was on the label, I had to go back and trim everything down. So my 9-inch squares became 8 3/4-inch squares, which is kind of a bummer because I had everything cut to size and had a plan for it. But word of caution, bring your ruler with you when you go shopping. And I don't know if this is something that's maybe going on elsewhere. I certainly haven't come across it because I've recently bought charm squares and they were 5 inches. But I did just want to share that with you. Okay, moving on. They're cut. We're good. We have a different size. Now, the disappointing part to me is I was thinking how fun it would be to offset these, but we're not going to go there because I'm not going to go through and recut those. But let me show you what we can do here with these blocks. Well, here's the first layout with the low volume background strips, the lattice that goes around the charm squares. And you see, you set it out in an alternating pattern and you get this block around each, and where they join up, see, this doesn't have lattice here, but when you join it up here, you create that block. And it just works like that throughout the quilt. And I really love this. This is a rail fence. This particular pattern, when it's made like this, it's a woven pattern. And when you have this outline, it looks like the weaving, or these are strips that are weaving, you know, under and over. And this is a common layout, and it's called a lot of different things. People will sell patterns similar to this, and you know, everyone gives it their personal name. But here's another thing you can do. I love putting quilts on point. Let's see, where's the right side here? Look how awesome this would be if we were to put this on point. This is what I'm thinking about. I may go ahead and create some more squares and then create this, because then you know what this is called? A basket weave, because it's going at an angle. So there's a lot you can do with this. The other thing that is popular, and I used 5-inch and 2.5-inch because they're common. We all have them, we all use them, and generally we have these sizes in our scrap pile. But the other thing you can do is make this a larger square or rectangle and use narrow pieces. And that just makes it a little more dramatic when you've got the narrow background. But what I also want to show you is what the reverse looks like. So these are 8 3/4 blocks, have the opposite, where they have the lighter backgrounds in the center and dark to the outside. So let me show you how this looks. So we would put this here, and then we can put, whoops, I need to space these out a little, and put that one there. And let's see, then we'll do one of these. And come down here this way. And you notice I turned this so I don't get the same color side by side. And while the centers are, let's see, I want to put this one in here. Let's go this way. While the centers are prints, even though they have color in them, they have a white background, so it tends to really step back. But isn't this awesome, the way this covers, and you get this, you know, this block. Now, for me, I think about, you know, those really bright tropical colors. Oh, here, look. This is some fabric I recently purchased from Art Gallery Fabric. It's called their Summer Elements, and it's all different floral prints. Or not floral, but like petals. But look at these colors now. Think about this with black around it. A really dark, deep black or navy blue. You know, you put something like this in the middle of that square. Oh my goodness, that would be so beautiful. So I just wanted to show this to you to give you some ideas. I know a rail fence doesn't always sound like the most exciting quilt to make, but I'm telling you, there are some incredible variations that are absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to take these and figure out just what I'll do. They may make some baby quilts. I had thought that I would do them front to back, put one on the back and one on the front. But if I do, I'd have to put a border on this side. So I have to get through all that. But I am really excited to share this with you. I hope you loved this idea and how easy it is to go together and how fun this can be to create a design for your quilt. So find some fabrics that you have in your scrap pile, pull them together, and start making your own. You'll love it. Thank you so much for following along and being here with me today. As always, it's such a pleasure to have you here and to be able to share my quilts with you. And I'm really excited about this one. I love these colors, how they turned out. The contrast is perfect. This is going to make a stunning quilt. I hope you enjoyed it too. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your day.